everybody. Thanks for coming today. Thanks for settling in. We got a little bit of a late start, but we are going to end at 9:30 sharp. A couple of our representatives have to leave a little early, so we'll bring enough for that. Full house this morning, so that's lovely to see everybody come down and support these types of events. I wanted to start off by thanking Community National Bank, our sponsor for today's event. I saw Sarah here somewhere. Really helps to get sponsors for these events, so we can continue to do that and continue to bring this host on the folks of Lamoille County. I did want to start as well just by mentioning, in case you don't know who's putting this event on, the logo's up here, but the Lamoille Economic Development Corporation, sometimes I forget who we are, and the Lamoille Chamber of Commerce. We're one of 12 RDCs around the state in support of business services in Lamoille County. So for us, the first heads at the Lamoille County line. So, theoretically. I think that's all I had. We'll go ahead and, I did want to recognize our board members today. We've got a bunch of LEDC and Lamoille Chamber board members here. I don't want to name you all by name, but if you wouldn't mind just standing up for a moment so we can acknowledge you. It's really looks like we've got almost concluded. Right, if there is any left when it's time to leave, I've put some brown bags over there, so feel free to fill a brown bag. Bathrooms are in the back outside the door to the left if you haven't been in the bench before, and that's all I have. So I was going to start by just having our representatives kind of go down the line and introduce themselves. Most of us know who's here, but some of us may not. And if you want to mention a committee assignment or a particular thing you're working on, just go over some brief comments before we get into questions from the group that's here today. Maybe Todd, let's start.
Happy to. Thank you for having this. Thank you for having me. Good to see everybody. We've got a really busy
legislative season coming up. Lieutenant Governor John Rodgers. I'm supposed to introduce myself. Much to do. I think you've all heard by now that the Act 73 task force did not make maps, which they were required to do, which I'm a little disappointed at. Whether you agree there should be more or less districts in the state or not, they were required by the legislature to do that. And then we were supposed to have the discussion as a full legislature. Lots of affordability. And as I was talking with a couple people this morning, I think those of us who live in rural communities like this have some serious concerns with Act 250 jurisdiction over much of our land and single family development, which we need more of. And so I think we've got a full plate and hopefully we can get some stuff done.
Good morning. Thank you everyone for coming out today. My name's Richard Bailey. I'm a Republican House Rep from Lamoille 2. It's a 2-member district with Dan Noyes. I serve on energy and digital infrastructure. And we've got some costly programs that I don't know how we're going to afford them, but to upgrade all our computer systems in the state, especially in the Human Services Department. And I'm not quite sure why, when we had all that money come in from COVID, these systems weren't upgraded, but a lot of them did not, and some of the stuff on human services, they're not getting the required stuff for Medicaid because the system just isn't working. So we'll see what we can do, but I'm not quite sure where the money's going to come from.
I'm Rich Westman. I represent most of all of the county except Stowe is in the Washington district in the state Senate. I also represent the town of Fletcher in Franklin County. My morning committee is transportation. I think arguably underneath all of the other pieces, the single budget that is in the most trouble this year will be transportation. And just to give you an idea of the magnitude of the difficulties that transportation is in, we have a $450 million construction budget within transportation, where we make match to pave our roads, do our bridges, and that $450 million budget, we're facing a shortfall this year of, because most matches with the federal is 80-20, and we don't have the state match to make it. We have a hole of about $150 million. So that, and that's offering the 450, and you look at it. Consistently, transportation is not making revenue estimates. We're all driving more efficient cars. A handful of us are moving to electric cars. When you put the whole picture together, transportation is in big trouble, and as chair of the Senate Transportation Committee, that will be my job to help work on the problem this winter in my morning. My afternoon committee, because in the Senate we serve on 2 committees, is appropriations, and the largest single K through 12 is the biggest expenditure in the state. The second largest expenditure, nearly as much, is Medicaid. And with the shifts and cuts at the federal level for Medicaid, it will be a busy year to try to figure out where we're going to go with all of that.
Yeah, thank you, Richie. Jed Lipsky, I'm an independent representative. I represent Lamoille 1 district, which is Stowe. Serve on Agriculture, Food Resiliency, and Forestry Committee. I'm very active in the Rural Caucus and in the National Guard and Veteran Affairs Caucus. But I am statewide very active in advocating for working lands and rural Vermont. So I say I represent 93% of Vermont communities. And with that said, you know, whether we're talking about the general umbrella of affordability, whether it's education, funding formula challenges, workforce housing for attracting young families to be able to live in Vermont, stay here, whether they grew up here and had to leave. I think that's one of our state's biggest challenges to be a sustainable state. And, you know, we brought up the tier 3 and tier 2, this issue of rulemaking. Lieutenant Governor Rodgers mentioned that. I have very serious concerns about those rules, and there's a new committee that is writing these rules. It's a the rules were set forth in Act 181, and it creates a serious economic burden to meet these goals of increasing population. We need young families to be part of our schools, to fill our schools, and to fill jobs. There isn't one business in Vermont that I've spoken to that isn't suffering from a lack of workforce or employees. So that's a universal problem all over Vermont, maybe all over the country. So those issues of the new rules, the new road rule, it's very regressive. They gave a free pass to most of the urban centers in Chittenden County where there was good infrastructure, both public water and public sewer. But these automatic triggers for Act 250 review, unless you're making money from out of state and you move here and you want a nice second home, that's great. But most of the people I spoke with at hearings around the state, they're trying to either pass on to their children their home and little land is all they've got. And they want their family to be able to stay, be part of the Vermont culture and community. So those are the sort of challenges I'm focused on. Obviously, healthcare is in crisis. Healthcare insurance, transportation, as Richie said, that's That's the major deficit fund in the state. And all these amount to very huge challenges facing us. So thank you, and I'll pass on to Mark here.
Thank you and good morning. Representative Mark Higley. I represent the Orleans-Lamoille district. It's a two-seat district now with Representative Mike Marcotte. Eden is my Lamoille County town. I serve on the Ways and Means Committee. We are right out of the gate going to take up a lot of information on Act 73, the Education Reform Bill. Just to let folks know, one of my concerns already is a report that came back from the tax department. Initially, our committee was looking for as many as 4, 5, and 6 different categories of taxation. Thank goodness the tax department stepped in and said, these are really not achievable. So in the end, there was an additional category that was proposed. The tax department came back with their recommendations. They're pretty extensive. That new category is a non-homestead residential category. Currently, we have a homestead category and a non-homestead category, where that non-homestead category covers all second homes and businesses and all that, and your homestead category is your residents. The concern that the tax department had is a lot of these small towns, like mine, I've been a lister for 31 years, it's going to have a hard time putting all this information together. There's going to be a attestation for folks that are full-time residents. There's going to have to be, we're going to have to look through Ways and Means as far as penalties and other information, other paperwork that's going to have to be filled out by folks to claim that they are a resident. Anyway, just a real concern for me, the bottom line in what the tax department considered, or the possibility was it could be a substantial increase for this new category of non-homestead residential. And, just to let folks know, the short-term rental, there was a tax that was included on them 2 years ago, and along with a cloud tax. So, there's already substantial, if you ask me, taxation going on, and it'll be interesting to see what we come up with. So, thank you.
Good morning. I'm Dan Noyes. I serve on the Human Services Committee. And obviously, as you've heard from my colleagues, we're going to be working a lot on how we fund education, what our structure looks like in our state. That's definitely going to be the main priority of this upcoming session, I'm sure. At least will be for me. I'm sure it will be for just about everybody there. Some of the things that I'm working on, in my Human Services Committee, I work a lot with the Dale budget and older Vermonters issues. And one of the things that I've been really thinking about lately and working, trying to find some solutions are around land use and looking at how we invest in age-specific housing, because in many rural parts of our state, there's not a lot of places for people to go as they age in terms of staying in their community. If you look at Cathedral Square, which is one of the providers of housing in Chittenden County, they have a 3 to 5 year waiting list. They run about 1,000 units, and their waiting list is around 1,300. So it's obvious that we have a population that is interested in places to live as they age in their communities, and we need to kind of figure out how to make those investments and get out of the way in terms of the regulations, especially in our village centers and downtowns, and how we can provide people with a place to live. One of the things also I've been recently working on is GA housing. So this is our motel program. Roughly 10% are over 65, and that's just not right. I've been going to these meetings and really saying, where are we making these investments around trying to figure out the case management? Why are these individuals unhoused? Where can we find some housing for them? And so that's been something recently I've been working on. I think this session in my committee, there'll be a lot of talk around those Medicaid cuts that Senator Westman was talking about. I mean, just to put it in perspective, nursing homes are looking for a $14 million investment for emergency financial relief. So this is nursing homes that potentially could close. Last year, I think it was 22 million that we had to kind of bail them out with. And a lot of it comes down to workforce. A lot of people are not going into working at nursing homes. And I know Senator Westman put in some money to support that workforce in LNAs. So that's something that we really need to focus on coming up, or we're just not going to have the nursing homes and home and community-based providers that we need so that people can age in their communities. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. I'm Dave Yacovone. I represent a portion of Stowe, Elmore, Morristown, Worcester, and Woodbury. I serve on the Appropriations Committee, and while we cover everything in state government, I'm assigned Medicaid health care, so hospitals, nursing homes, home health agencies, physicians, and others, and all of mental health. But I could go into any of those. I won't. I just wanted to speak to one bill that I'm a prime co-sponsor on. The Vermont Constitution in the preamble speaks very clearly to the consent of the governed. I'm using that policy, mandate, and authority in a bill that would make sure that before any school is closed, the governed, the people in that town, would have the final say on whether to keep it closed or whether to keep it open. Not a state board, not a district board, however configured, but the people in the town to make that decision. I'm an advocate of small rural schools. I appreciate the need for consolidation, but I don't think I should make that. I think the residents of the town should. And that's not necessarily protected right now, which is why we have the bill. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Lucy Boyden. I represent Lamoille 3, Cambridge, and Waterville. I sit on the Committee of Government Operations and Military Affairs, and I'm also the clerk of the Rural Caucus. And throughout the off session, I've been meeting with constituents and business owners, talking with them about problems that they're facing or ideas for bills. I've also been meeting with the Rural Caucus leadership. We're working on a bill to provide notice to landowners regarding Act 250 changes, some of that Tier 3 that Jed was talking about. I've also been meeting with some other legislators who we have been working together on a government accountability bill for the past couple of years now, ever since I started in the legislature, and we keep facing some roadblocks. So hoping that this year is a session that it comes to fruition.
Thank you. Good morning, Saudia, LaMont, also Lamoille-Washington District, Morristown, Elmore, Worcester, Woodbury, and a small part of Stowe. And I serve on the House General and Housing Committee. And during the off session, I've been attending lots of conferences, trainings, meetings, and hosting lots of things with both constituents and in work worlds. The things that we're looking for myself when I head back into committee this week, tomorrow, is looking at some landlord-tenant stuff where I had a bill in last session, and we're hoping that that's gonna come off the wall this year. We're going to revisit some Act 181 stuff with the tiers and the road rule, and hopefully we can look at some alternative development things as well in that, as well as some civil rights, but more so for maintaining the integrity of the rights that we have especially for folks with disabilities. Because as things have happened on a federal level, the laws are still in place but not enforced. And so I want to really make sure that we here in Vermont are making sure we're taking care of our most vulnerable populations and making sure that people have access to the things that they need, and we are not falling to the same systems that other states are doing right now. So that's sort of where my purview is these days. Thank you.
Thanks, Saudia. All right, we'll go to the group now. I know it's always hard to break the ice, but there's a lot of us here, and I'm sure some great folks. Rod is going to be our man on the mic here. So if you can kind of raise your hand, give us the look. Yeah, we see some hands coming up already. Great. I'll do my best to direct on since Jack's dog is well led.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning to everyone. Thank you for being here. Saudia, I'm glad you showed up because you are the person apparently I need to address my question to. I have a client who's a landlord, and the tenant did not pay, long-term tenancy. Didn't pay. 2 years of mortgage payments and real estate taxes, $30,000 in attorney fees, going through the courts, not getting dates. This is our housing problem. It has nothing to do with availability. It's people who stay in there that don't pay. And then these people, the landlords decide, this isn't worth it. I'm gonna rent short term. I'm gonna have nurses in here. I'm not gonna have these headaches. What are we doing? You said something, your comment was landlord-tenant stuff. Can you expand on that? Can we repeal some of these rules that make this a tenant state and make it a landlord state, because landlord states don't have the housing issues as far as renting long-term that tenant states do?
Thank you. Yes. So part of what's in my bill is there's stipulations around trying to make it, I don't want to say easier for folks to evict folks. That's not the goal. The goal is to make it a more mutually beneficial experience. What you're talking about is, which is what my bill is for, is just cause. That is a valid reason to evict someone for lack of payment for over the course of an extended period of time. We're trying to make it so that landlords can have more rights for their property, to protect their property and their resources, as well as tenants who pay on time, who respect the property and who live there are protected to stay there without being evicted for unjust reasons. So what we're trying to find is that balance between, I think what we're talking about are two different things. But when I say landlord tenant, I'm talking about finding that just cause area. But what you're talking about is the speed of access. And we don't have, which I would like to see us have, a area of the court system that is solely for evictions, because part of the problem why it takes so long is because the court is tied up. And when we hear testimony from the legal aid services, and they come in and they explain to us that it's the court process that takes the time, I would like to see that mitigated as well. So I will be looking into that this session. That's when I say landlord tenant, those are the things that I'm referring to.
Thanks, Saudia. So a question in the back and one in the middle here as well. Thought I did. Great. Thank you.
All right, good morning. Thank you. First of all, Nathan Pickard. Just a brief outline here. So one question that I have for y'all is when we talk about affordability, right? And we talk about housing and how we're going to do this and how we invest back into Vermont, right? And so what I hear is like, we're trying to build all these apartments, right? We're trying to get this housing in. How is that investing back into our people to stay here in Vermont if we're investing in just apartments, right? I understand it's a housing piece, but who is that investing to? You know, homeowners are the ones who get to own their property, right? And to be able to have that affordability. If you're consistently paying rent and you're consistently paying high rents and nothing that you're ever regaining, how does that work for the Vermonter that we want to stay here? And then the second question that I raise is I hear a lot that we're working on so many things, but so a little bit of my background is I was a public servant for 25 years. I'm a declarated public servant in the state of Vermont, honored by VSP and the governor himself, right? I've been in many of these homes throughout Morrisville, Cambridge, in the 911 settings. So at what point do we look at maybe safety and what we provide for safety within our schools or safety within our communities to actually correct our budgets, right? If we put public safety first whenever we're actually creating a policy to make it equal and equal to everybody, right? So whenever a policy is basically created, it's not based off of one person. You're basing it off of every single taxpayer or just every single person within this community. I feel like Vermont's lost the sight of who we are, right? So I'm not from Vermont originally. I'm a transplant, half my time here. So I don't want to lose any credibility for that. But what I learned coming from Texas to here is Vermont's the same in a way, right? We're beautiful states. We're a very self-reliant state, but we quit relying on our neighbors. We're too reliant on the state for money. We're too reliant on the federal government for money, right? But at some point, we have to quit being reliant, and we as a community, and I feel as y'all as our legislators, need to stand up and be like, hey, we need to worry about our neighbors first. I'm not worried about what's going on throughout the world. I'm worried about what's going on here in Vermont. Thank you.
I know I'm not going to monopolize. I just want to say something real quick and then I'll pass the mic. But since I have it, I just wanted to say thank you for that, because that is something that I've been talking about as well. And I'm going to touch on two things: the education, the property tax, and the housing. I think it's very important that we have a diversified housing stock. So important. And I think when we talk about building more units or putting more units online, I think it's to address our demographic, as we have folks who want to age in place, or folks who no longer have the use of their size of their home, so that we can differentiate and relocate and still keep our population here. So that's what's important to me, is diversifying our housing stock. So when I'm talking about looking into development, that is what I'm referring to, not condensing and building more. That is not what I'm talking about, just to be clear. And then the second thing I want to talk about, word diversity again. Also, we just had a coffee conversation, and great conversation with the group that was there. And I would love to see us shift the way we fund our education, so that it's not putting so much onus on our homeowners and the property taxes. Because when you look at who is utilizing our school district and our schools, I think, come for me if you want, it's okay. But I feel like we should have more coming in from the income tax, because when you look at who is utilizing our school system, there needs to be equity in how we're funding that. And I think putting all the onus on property owners is not equitable. And so that's something that I was also talking about, but not my thing. So
Thanks, Saudia. I think Jed had something to say. It didn't take us long to get to the property taxes. I'm not surprised. There's another mic in the middle of the table there, so right in front of Dan. So if you want to share a little bit.
Yeah, I just want to respond to the gentleman's notion about self-reliance. I think Vermont has a very proud tradition of neighbor helping neighbor. But to be clear, 32 to 34% of the revenue that comes into the state has come from the federal government. And that includes transportation, and that includes Medicaid. So in a tiny state, 640 population, 640,000 population, backfilling that 32 to 34% is a challenge. And as Richie said, transportation, I see selectmen here from Morristown, their highway department, Stowe's, the infrastructure, roads, bridges, culverts, paving, they're all way behind the curve for both budgets and actual capital to make these improvements. So being self-reliant is a great American tradition. How we do it and transform without a large, we don't have Houston, we don't have Silicon Valley, we don't have that thing down near Boston, that big gateway of high tech. We've got darn tough socks, we got Ben and Jerry's, So anyway, these are great important notions about self-reliance. And I think the Vermont and community tradition is great of neighbor helping neighbor, but we've got huge capital challenges to transition to that point.
John had something to add, and then we'll move on to another question.
You make a great point about building apartments. We do need some apartments in some places, but I think most people want to live the American dream and own a home, because without owning a home, what are we doing? Just what you said. We're concentrating the wealth. So we got wealthy people coming in, developing big apartments, and we got a whole bunch of people giving them most of their income every month. They're never going to build equity. They're never going to have intergenerational wealth to pass on. The legislature, unfortunately, with their Act 250 reform, has gone the wrong direction, making it almost impossible for average working Vermonters to build a home in rural Vermont, which is where many Vermonters want to live. A lot of people who come here, a lot of people who grew up here, don't want to live in an apartment in Burlington. If you want to live in an apartment in Burlington or Montpelier or Brattleboro, that's fine. That's great. But the young folks that I talk to, both the folks who grew up here and the folks who came here from somewhere else, they want a small house connected to nature where they can have a garden, where they can maybe raise a few animals and be independent, be self-sufficient. They want to build the equity that only homes build. They want to build that intergenerational wealth that they can pass down to their kids. Our legislature has made that harder. And everybody in this room needs to make sure their legislators know, if you agree with me, that this new tier system and the road rule are disastrous. I gave my son a piece of land a couple years ago so him and his family could build a house. First thing, and my friend Senator Westman knows about this, it cost me $3,500 to give him a piece of land because I had to take it out of current use. He and his wife just got done building their house. We were fortunate enough to be able to help them out a lot, but they still had over $600,000 in a house. But let's face it, building materials are ridiculous. Kids trying to get started here, and that is what we need in the state of Vermont. That's why I love tech centers so much. We have so much potential to give our kids the skills they need to make enough money to be able to live here, but they need a house to live in. And so it's essential that the legislature gets it, because when you're talking about the road rule, if I give a kid a piece of property and he needs 1,000-foot road and it comes under Act 250, they're not going to be able to afford to build a house there. But you know who will? The rich person that comes from Boston or from New Jersey. They're going to hire the lawyers. They're going to hire the architects and the engineers. They're going to pay whatever it costs to build their $4 million house on the side of the mountain on a 2,000-foot road. And so what we are doing is making it so regular Vermonters can't afford to build a house in the community. And there are many in the legislature and many of their big funders who believe that everybody should move to Burlington and live in an apartment. And I just wholesalely disagree with that. And we need to make sure our rural communities are taken care of.
Thanks. I saw a question in the middle here. You still have a question? No? Okay. I got a bunch over that way. Oh, gotcha.
Hi, Laura Straits. I'm a select board here in Morristown and director of the Morrisville Farmers Market. Excuse me. I want to say first about housing. I come from a big city. I've been here 25 years. I feel like I'm penalized for not being born here, but we need to incentivize condos. Condos are stepping stones to buy houses. All I hear is apartments, houses. Condos are affordable. It builds equity, and then they can afford to buy the house. That's how I got here. Second thing I want to say is that what I'm hearing as we're dealing with budget is it's all talk about we need money, we need money, we need money, but there's never a talk about reducing expenses. It's a hot topic. So I want to throw out a few, not open really for conversation. We're taxing our seniors to death, nickel and diming them. I have senior citizens who complain that we pay no complaints about education, no complaints about feeding a child, no complaints about insurance. But now they're getting paid, now we have to pay a child care tax. So for seniors to go to work, you now have this extra tax. Well, most of them have raised kids. I have to pay a child care tax on my measly amount of money I get paid for the select board. I mean, when does it stop? The other thing is I would like to see us get rid of the inspection like New Hampshire's doing. We're throwing away very, very good cars. I had to throw away a 5-year-old Forester, 64,000 miles because it had a little bit of rust. Many seniors no longer have cars because when they're forced to throw their cars away, because of this, they cannot afford or find another car. Therefore, they can't work. We are creating a nightmare here. The other thing I would like to say is I would like to see us incentivize dentists and doctors. I just went to Lamoille Dental. They have a waiting list of 800 people trying to get dental care. Let's think northern exposures. Instead of paying people $10,000 to move here to work, let's start incentivizing doctors and dentists for our rural communities. Thank you.
You should run for office.
Let me start out. All of the studies that are out there, we need about 50,000 homes now. And each year, because our housing stock is so old, we lose 2 to 3% of our housing stock in because they age out and they need to be redone and fixed up. So it's a churning that goes on in that. But when you need 50,000 homes in a place with 640,000 people, we need to get off our butt and do something about every level of housing, whether it's you're coming out of school, you aren't going to be able to afford a house. You need an apartment, but you need it to be cheap enough that you can save some money while you're in that apartment to get your down payment on the next home, move on to maybe a condo, maybe some, and it's a process that you go through and then you get a house in that. We have a real problem, and it's not just Act 250. I have a young partner who's 26 years old, and we built a duplex. And we didn't have to go through Act 250. By the time it took us 18 months for the state to tell us, no, you don't have to get a wetlands permit. You have septic permits that you have to get. We had subdivision requirements for the town. Every single level that we had to go through cost us money and cost us time. It took us almost 2 years to get through all of the permits we had to do before we could build that, and we're paying the mortgage on the piece of land. So it's at almost every level that we have to and look at this, and we need housing at every level now, and that affects, I have tons of people that are older in our communities that can't move out of their home because they have no place to go and they want to downsize. We need to figure out how to do this. And I would say Act 250 is a big issue, and a huge issue for our villages with septic and all. But in a lot of small towns, in a lot of families where they just want to build a house for their kid, or somebody like Donnie Blake wants to build 3 or 4 houses in an area. It's the environmental permits that A&R has on that I don't want us not to follow the rules, but there's got to be a better way to help people through the process. And it just isn't applying for the permit. You can't get the engineer to do the work to get to the place where you go into the permit. We need to rethink about the whole system from the ground up.
Yeah, and this is working. Is this working? Yes. Sorry. Yeah, no doubt we need to make those investments, and it's not just it is property that people can build and own, because if you're going to downsize, you don't want to get rid of all your equity. You want to reinvest it in maybe a smaller place to live, place closer to services. But yeah, those small they're not apartment, but small homes are being competed not only with first-time home buyers, but individuals looking to downsize. So that's why I want to see more investment and getting out of the way in the permitting on building entry-level or downsize housing in our village centers, or just where people can live. And then to your point around vehicle inspections, you can ask anybody on the transportation committee if they're tired of seeing me come around and say that over and over. I mean, you could even look here from 10 years ago, I was saying it. So maybe. Right, exactly. I pointed that out. I actually put an amendment on a bill this last session to deal with it, but I didn't get very far.
And I went to both committees and advised them to do the same. So I heard from one guy who works at home who has had to replace the rotors on his car the last 3 years in a row. Now, they may have had rust on them, but I was actually trained in automotive mechanics. There's nothing wrong with them. The only reason a rotor should have to be thrown away is if it's so rusty from the inside that you can crush it, and then your calipers might crush it. But we have people from New Hampshire, Connecticut, Florida, and all the other states that don't inspect their cars driving on our roads. So why are Vermonters being punished? And they're being punished to an extreme measure because many garages are using this and they're afraid of the liability to make a ton of extra money and to charge Vermonters money they can't afford. So now we have a ton of Vermonters driving around the state with no sticker. Because they can't afford it. And like, I've got a Subaru out there right now that needs a rocker panel before it can get inspected here in the spring. That rocker panel has nothing to do with safety. It's a rusty rocker panel. It doesn't affect the structure, doesn't affect the drivability. If we are going to have an inspection, it needs to be focused only on front-end compartments and make sure the brakes work. There should be nothing else. Rust shouldn't matter. I've literally had senior citizens call me practically crying, saying, I can't afford another car, and they've just told me I can't drive this car. How do I? And in rural Vermont, you have to have a car. So we need to make a change. It's time for the legislature to do it. I've been advocating for it, along with Representative Noyes. Him and I talk about it often. That's something that needs to happen. On to Senator Westman's, wetlands is a huge problem. The number one call I get in my office is about affordability and people who can't keep up. The second one is wetlands and people who have gone through all their municipal permitting, got their DEC permits for their wastewater, built a house, and then wetlands comes along and slaps a massive fine on them, saying they're in a wetland when there's no evidence of them being in a wetland. So we have to have a map that delineates the wetlands that need to be protected so that everybody knows. DEC needs to be more responsible about how they're handling these problems, and they need to make the process easier and faster.
I just put it to you this way. If I have to apply for a permit and I don't want to not live within all of the rules that need to be out there. If you're a builder and you're building 2 or 3 homes, you need an engineer. If you're doing a project with 100 units, you need an engineer. If you're somebody that can afford to build 100 units, the engineering company automatically gravitates towards the larger developer and not the small individual person that's out there. My question really is, when and once everything gets put together, it can slide through the process and usually works through the process the way it is all thought of. But the question is, if we're going to incentivize small builders that are out there, which I personally would much rather do, how do we help them get through to the process where they can apply? How can I take the carpenter that might do 2 or 3 houses, or the family that wants to give land to their kids to do that? How do I get them to the place where they can get an engineer to help them make that application? That's where I think a lot of the people get stuck and can't get through the process. And it's almost like a bottleneck for people to apply.
Yeah, I just want to elaborate a little bit on the whole issue here. There's so much to it, and we have to prioritize where we're headed. And we can't do it when we continue to have a wildlands bill out there that's going to tie up more land. 30 by 30 and 50 by 50. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with that, but that's securing the conservation easements and so on 30% of our land by 2030 and 50% by 2050. There's the Tier 3 that was talked about in Act 181, which includes wildlife corridors and all that. You're really, once this Tier 3 mapping comes out, you're really taking land from people as to what they can do with it. There's the 3-acre rule, just to go on with some other things that are, causing hardships with businesses, fairs, you name it. There was even a bill that was looking at going around to the towns and finding out which towns had to have their sand piles covered, not their salt piles, their sand piles. These are all things that are adding to the cost. Another example I'll give you is on Act 181, I went in and proposed, I sit on LCAR, so I'm familiar with the residential building energy standards and commercial standards. I went in and asked for a 2-year reprieve on those to kind of move things along. There was a home builder that came in and testified it costs $28,000 more to follow the residential building energy standards on an 1,800 square foot home. Thank goodness the governor, through an executive order, is looking at allowing contractors to go back to the 2020 standards, and if they want, and of course he's being fought on that issue as well. So again, we talked the good talk about affordable housing and getting housing out there and all that, and then we've got all these other bills that come into play that are going to tie this up. And I've got to say too that we on the other side try to implement some reasonable suggestions for this, and it never goes anywhere. And one of the ones on the 30 by 30 and 50 by 50 is I reached out to the Farm Bureau, the Professional Loggers Group, the Vermont Forest Products Association, and the Rural Caucus actually took it on to include land that's in current use in that 30 by 30 and 50 by 50 designation. And I got 5 minutes in committee, and that was it. This is reasonable, common sense approach to land that's out there that, in my mind, is being utilized to its best potential, whether it's forest land or ag land, and we can't get it included in that designation. So they're going to go out and look for another 2 million acres to tie up. So anyway, a lot going on out there. Thanks.
Hi, is this on? Yeah. My name is Erin Mandeville. I'm a certified nurse midwife. I grew up in Vermont in the Upper Valley, and I wanted to thank all of our representatives and legislators who worked on the bill that we successfully passed last session to allow freestanding birth centers in Vermont, which wasn't a possibility before. All of this is important. Thank you, everyone. It's all connected. Roads, housing, everything. There's currently nowhere in Lamoille County to have a baby right now after the closure of Copley's Birthing Center. There's a group of us that are working hard to put together about $3 million to start a freestanding birth center. It will not be in Lamoille County because we have nowhere to transfer to. It will likely be in Waterbury, about 20 minutes down the road from CVMC and 45 minutes to UVM, who has a NICU. It's all connected. People who own a business in this county should be very concerned. How do you have a base for anything you do without new humans coming into our county? How do you attract new families to the county, or young couples who want to build a family? so it's a huge issue. I know there was $195 million, which goes quickly. It sounds like a lot, but it's probably not. CMS money, and then the $50 million for maternal health initiative, which, as I've heard other people echo, a lot of this goes is in the hands of the big players at UVM. We do have the endorsement of Jeffrey Pipert, who is the new chair of OBGYN at UVM. But I guess my question or my ask is, how do we get to the table to benefit from some of those funds that are allocated, and just to bring the awareness that birth centers will save insurance companies and people so much money. The cost of having a baby at a freestanding birth center is so much cheaper than having a baby at a hospital. And so just wanting to get that message out there and make sure that we're at the table when that money is, I think it's Appropriations Committee via Healthcare Committee via whatever, but just to put that on people's radar. We do have a website if anyone wants to check it out, greenmountainbc.org. Thank you.
Thank you for your work on that. And as you know, we were talking about, I know that Chair Black on the Healthcare Committee is a big advocate of standalone birthing centers, and I will work with you any way I can to help make sure that you have a voice at the table there, because I think we do need to make these investments, and if we can use federal money, even better.
Thanks, Dan. I too would do the same. Try to schedule you if with one of the appropriate committees. Could be in the Senate with Ginny Lyons. Could be the Appropriations Committee to sit down, and you need to make, and you may already have it, a specific ask of what you need and what you want, as opposed to this is a difficult issue. Got to connect the dots for people. Thank you.
I'd just like to say this is part of a bigger problem in rural Vermont. My kids actually, I think today or tomorrow, my newest grandson turns a month old, and they were going to Copley, but the birthing center closed about 2 months before the baby was born, so they had to transfer. They live in Glover, and she works in Colchester, so it was a nice point in between, but and it's super important to have a place in every community. And unfortunately, the way healthcare is going, hospitals are cutting everything that doesn't make money. NVRH is cutting programs. I think every rural hospital is cutting programs. And just because the programs aren't making money doesn't mean that those people don't need the services. And so as a state, we've got to figure out how do we do it. And unfortunately, it always goes back to money, and it's hugely expensive, and it's another failure of our federal government, as studies have revealed that we already spend enough tax dollars to provide health care for every man, woman, and child in the United States, yet we only provide them for 30%, right? And so we're wasting all that money on profit for pharmaceutical companies and giant healthcare organizations and insurance companies instead of providing health care for our families. It's extremely unfortunate, but at this point, Washington, D.C. is broken. And I mean, this president and Congress with the losing the assistance for health insurance, I think has set us way back. But even administrations and Congresses before have failed to deal with health care in this country. And why do we have the most expensive health care with worse outcomes than all other countries, industrialized countries? And we just need a president and a Congress who are actually going to deal with health care, because unfortunately, there's some things we can do here in the state of Vermont, but we don't have the money to do everything that we need. And rural America is losing health care. As somebody earlier said, we don't have enough dentists. If I call my primary care physician and need an appointment, I'm lucky to get in a year. It's the same with the dentist. And it needs to be resolved. We'll do what we can in the state, but it's a bigger issue than us. But thanks for your work on that.
Thank you. I've introduced a bill. I will be. It'll be coming out for consideration, focusing on the Green Mountain Care Board and giving it more tools to manage healthcare expenditures. Instead of having hospitals, this is not intended to criticize them, but instead of hospitals looking at which clinical service in the community they can eliminate or significantly reduce, I'd far rather have someone requiring hospitals to look at how they can reduce their administrative expenses. The bill would give the Green Mountain Care Board the authority, this is just for illustrative purposes as an example, it would give them the authority to say, for instance, to 3 hospitals, St. Johnsbury, Newport, Morrisville, do you each need a CEO? Do you each need a CFO? Do you each need your backroom fiscal services? Do you need HR? Could you consolidate your quality oversight and management and come together with a plan that's viable, but it's coordinated, not unlike what some of the conversation around education is. Do we need 51 superintendents? People that have to look at administrative consolidation, I would hope, before they look at any clinical reductions. So that's what the bill would give the Green Mountain Care Board the authority to have this kind of conversation and to direct it if need be.
Just quickly, definitely one of the major drivers of our education spending is around healthcare. And a small thing that I'm introducing, some legislation this session, is to have all the hospitals in Vermont use the same auditor. That way, everybody's reporting the same. We can look at our costs across the state. It's just a small piece, but I think we need to just keep chipping away at some of these costs, and this might be a way to help with that.
Thank you. Peter Schmeckley, I live in Stowe, grew up in Barrie, and seems like when I left Barrie in 1984, Vermont had about 600,000 people in it. And according to Jed, I think we have about 600,000 people right now. So 620, thank you. We're growing, 640,000 people. During that time, I moved to Seattle, Los Angeles. I've been in many large areas, but I guess my question is, do we want to grow? You know, does Vermont want to grow? Because we have regulations. We can't build housing because you know, you have so many permits to go through, and we want to conserve the land. We want to save the land, protect the land. So there's so many hoops we have to jump through just to get bigger. We don't want Amazon to come because it's big business. So what I want to propose is that we grow a little bit. You know, maybe we say, hey, Vermont could get up to 750,000 people. Let's bring in Amazon. You know, not to Stowe, but, you know. But I know somebody in Vermont wants Amazon. And I, as a Vermonter, I want Amazon here, more jobs, right? Okay. All right, so let's grow a little bit. We still want to conserve and protect our public spaces. We don't want billboards, but along the lines of billboards, we don't want any more windmills, right? And even solar. I don't hate solar, but if it messes up your landscape, then what's the point of living in Vermont? And what are we protecting? So last thing I want to mention is that I want to work together more with the federal government. I think our delegation right now is an embarrassment, and it doesn't make Vermont look good. It doesn't make us look like we want to work together with the federal government. I'm like Vance. I was in the Marine Corps. I respect Trump. And if we can be friends with the federal government, maybe this 30% of our budget that is covered by the federal government, maybe it's going to be 35%, or maybe we can stop suing the federal government, and they'll be happier to help us and help us with debt relief and stuff like this. So I think we can grow a little bit. That's all I have. Thank you.
Jump in if I can. And pivot off that a little bit, Vermonters spend roughly $5 billion a year on groceries. 75% of that $5 billion goes out of state, never to return again. Vermonters spend approximately $2 billion a year on fossil fuels. Roughly 75% of that money goes out of state, never to return. Could we, should we, would we put together a plan that over time, aggressively, but over time with a plan so that it was the least disruption as possible to our economy, change that dynamic? Could we work with other New England states on a food plan to keep our dollars much more here? Yes, somebody will say, well, look out the window, Dave, it's hard to grow anything. Well, could you grow anything? Could you have indoor growth on things? Could you work around that and plan with that? The same with the fossil fuels. Has anybody put together a plan? Those dollars then can circulate in Vermont, and I believe that's one way to address the issue of affordability because it primes the pump more. And I'm hoping by talking with the administration and others, we can at least get some movement on this, of which I've seen very little thus far.
I think that's a good point about food, and I talk about it everywhere I go. One of the best things that we can do for the environment, for the planet, is to build deep organic soil and grow more food here at home. Only a couple generations ago, we weren't shipping all our produce from California and getting avocados from Mexico and grapes from South Africa. And we have massive potential to grow more food here. And I believe that building good soil and growing food here is better for the environment than planting solar panels in those fields. I'm a fan of solar electric generation, but right now, and it's gotten better, but under the current system, those who don't have solar panels are subsidizing those who do have solar panels. The folks who have solar panels are more apt to be affluent, and the folks that are helping pay for it are more apt to be poor. So there's structural problems. Solar electricity should be at market rate. It shouldn't be incentivized anymore because the technology is proven. It needs to be built on homes and on the built infrastructure, and we should not be using up our prime ag land to fill it with solar panels. I think there's massive potential. There's a large grain growing movement here happening in the state. We used to grow a lot more of our own grain. We have the potential. We have the farmland. I think we should be utilizing it. Amen. All right, we're short of. Oh, you go ahead. We haven't heard from you yet.
Yeah. Speaking of the solar and the market rate, that is in my committee, and I've been pushing for these big farms that utilities should be paying for that electricity at market rate, because again, as Lieutenant Governor said, the people who have the things are being subsidized by the people who don't have solar, and it's very costly. These climate programs are very, very costly for us to administer, and you're not going to see a huge result out of it. And if we're looking at on the climate stuff, we need to rethink that whole process. I think we need to start all over again and begin to modify some of these laws that are out there, or repeal them and put in something that works and is reasonable.
Thanks. All right, so we are short on time, and we've got Joe in the middle here, and then I'm going to go over here because you've been waiting a while. Well, we're not going to get to everybody today. There's about 8 minutes left. We do need to end at around 9, as close to 9:30 as possible. But I will say, as we have another breakfast coming up in Stowe, the first Monday of the month, whatever that day is. February 2nd. After that, in March, we will be at Jenna's in Johnson, and in April, we'll be at Smuggler's Notch. So come again. We never get to everybody's questions, but we're going to do Joe, and we're going to go over here because you've been waiting a while. So let's try to move it along. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. Joe Wooden, I'm the administrator at Copley. Really appreciate all the discussion. Some of it's hilarious. I think if we asked for Amazon at Stowe, maybe that's the beginning of maybe having Amazon on the interstate and it would work. Just ask for something outrageous. So that would be outrageous, like put one in Stowe. Stupid idea, but it might work. Move public opinion. Anyways, yeah. A couple of comments. The birthing center program, the independent one, it really is the most cost-effective way. If you want to save money, it's complicated. It's not easy to do, and everybody can argue the pros and cons. But at the end of the day, it is one of the most cost-effective models, actually, and they exist in a bunch of places. So, we should try to figure that out. I appreciate being brought up. The other thing is, I'm new to the state. I've only been here 43 years. Thank you. Most Vermonters will say, damn right, keep your comments short. But anyways, I took a 2-year hiatus. I was in Alaska. They have that same problem with trying to figure out how to grow food. So we don't often ask other states what they do, but Alaska is a really good example. They desperately are trying to grow food because literally 95% of their food is brought in. So it's kind of an interesting concept. Around healthcare, we've got a bunch of money coming from the feds, a lot of money, $195 million for the next 5 years. So in essence, it's $1 billion. And I think we need to figure out how to spend that wisely on making transformative changes and not necessarily just paying for the existing problems. So I really appreciate everybody up there working on this. Dan, thanks for sort of saying we should get a single auditor. Maybe we could figure that out, spend a little bit of money, and then forever it's done. It shouldn't actually cost the hospitals anything in the end. And Dave, I really appreciate your discussion about how do we cut some of the administrative costs? Healthcare is having the same problem the schools do. At some point, you say you can't afford it. We can't afford this many schools. It's super painful, but we should look at these options. And I'm not a big fan of consulting reports, but they do help. So if you paid somebody to look at the administrative discussions Dave was talking about, that might actually help. We did have Oliver Wyman come through the state and did a large report, and the state sort of asked hospitals to abide by it, but these are all tough decisions, and it's not easy to stand up and say, I think this is important to do for the right reason. So we should try to encourage you folks to make those tough decisions, stand behind you. Even if it's an independent birthing center, somebody would say, well, it's extra cost. When they do their math, they could say, no, it's not a good idea. But in the end, it really is a very good idea because it's cost effective. So I appreciate everybody pitching in and talking about these issues. It's not easy. I do get depressed every time I come here, because the outlook is so negative and we're not really growing the business. We should really try to grow the economy, to grow taxes. It's not just taxing people more, but have the attitude and the language of always saying, how do we grow whatever we want to do? That's why I'm on the board of the Lamoille Economic Development Corporation. I think it's important that we grow the businesses, whatever they look like, so that we can get taxes and take care of police, environment, educational issues, et cetera. Thanks for listening.
Thanks. I'm glad it kind of worked out this way serendipitously. I wanted to just climb in on tie a thread between the conversations that have happened today. We heard about growth, we heard about housing, what types of housing, where are we gonna build it? Who are we building housing for if Vermonters can't afford to stay here? We're talking about Vermonters not having children because they can't give birth here. We're talking about growth, we're talking about growing food, we're talking about growing humans, we're talking about growing our economy, growing businesses, all of these things that need to take place. And I just want, so that you don't feel discouraged, because these conversations can be hard and they are discouraging. I know myself, I had a lot of anxiety. I'm like, what are we going into next week? This is terrifying. Like, there's so much to undertake. But at the end of the day, we are Vermonters, and we do have each other to rely on for that resilience and that strength to get us through. But it also is that partnership. We are here to serve you. It's not, what is your legislators doing? We're off doing our own thing, right? So we work in partnership, in concertum, and I really hope that we can continue to do that as we go forward through this session. And I just wanted to end on that note. We talked a lot about growth and for whom. and it's for us, and we're here to serve you. So let's continue to build that partnership as we get through the session and continue to reach out.
Hey, just real quick on the growth. Google Kevin Shue, the Vermont Futures Project. He's got some really good insight on growing Vermont to 802, 802,000. So anyways, I won't.
Kevin has actually been, for our members, he was at our annual luncheon and he was at a recent event we had. If anyone wants more information on the Futures Project, reach out to me. I've got a lot of information I can provide. Give you your own blood.
Hello, my name's Eric Noose. I've only been here 54 years, so I will be quick. I just like to point out what I'm listening to here and have been hearing is important short-term problems, medium-term some. But I just like to remind everybody that we really do need to think long-term. It's easy to talk about permit reform and all that, but you got to remember what the golden goose in Vermont is, particularly in my town in Johnson. And it is our beautiful state and our environment and our healthy water and air that we have here. That's why people come here. True, some of them come with a ton of money. Some of us are here without much money. A lot of us choose to stay here even though we could do way better someplace else. And a lot of my buddies did. They stayed down in Philadelphia, and I went down there the other day. It was awful. There's no way I could live there more than a day. So just remember that when we're doing any of this reform. The other golden goose, of course, is outdoor recreation. We're on a committee in Johnson looking at outdoor rec. We're trying to take advantage of FEMA and our floods and say, okay, we got to do stuff different, and we're moving that way. So that's the only thing I have to say. And I know that's in the back of your guys' minds, but it's easy for all this real important close-up stuff to take precedent. But just remember, we're saving this state not only for us, but for our grandkids and their grandkids too.
Yeah, we have Lamoille Union High School current events class over here.
All right.
Here's our future right here, people.
If I could just make a short comment on that, you're absolutely right. And that's one of the reasons that I want to start utilizing the ag land that we have. As a person, like I think Jed and I are the only ones that work in the State House elected positions that have skidders and actively manage forest, right? If we don't save our working landscape, we're not Vermont, number one. But the problem today is that our kids, this right here, it represents our future. From my perspective, the kids that are going through these tech centers, if we're going to build the houses that we need, and I don't agree with Kevin, I don't want to get to 802 because I think that's too many people. We have to find a sustainable number, but we need at the same time to change our demographics. How do we change the demographics? We train our students for the jobs that we need here in Vermont. And we have a great manufacturing center actually all around the state, but over around Chittenden County, it's condensed. Those folks can't find the people they need to fill good paying jobs. We need to make sure we're training our kids for those jobs. We need to make sure we're training our kids for the trades. That way they can stay here. But what we need is more affordable houses for those kids so we can change our demographics without destroying our environment. But what's happening today is we now have 20% of our homes in Vermont owned by people who don't live in them. That is what is driving the housing crisis. And those are rich people. And I have nothing against rich people. I mean, that I do stonework and excavation. A lot of them have spent money with me. It's great. But at what point is it too much? Because they come from Boston or New York City where they make a ton of money and they buy a house that a family used to live in. And now they upgrade it and it's a $5 million house and nobody who lives here will ever be able to afford it. So there's a lot of things going on, but you're absolutely right. If we don't preserve that working landscape here in Vermont, we are not Vermont.
All right, last question of the day.
Yeah, thank you. Act 73, I can't believe this is the first time this is being mentioned today. So it seems like right now there's an option to let the remainder of the bill die on the vine by not creating a map, or create a map and force consolidation on districts, or to go middle road and follow the redistricting task force recommendations. And I just wanted to survey the folks up there what you think. And while I agree with almost everything our esteemed Lieutenant Governor said today, I will correct the record that Act 73 dictated the redistricting task force to come up with not more than 3 maps, which they did. And whether you count the cooperative education services areas as 0 maps or a half or 1 map, they did in fact follow law. I went to a couple of those meetings and I thought they did some very thorough research. 170-page report with a lot of good information in it. So I'm just kind of curious, folks up there, where do you stand now as far as Act 73? Thank you for your time.
That's a really great point. They did come up with less. My personal belief is that we should form districts around tech centers. I think every kid deserves the opportunity to go to a tech center. I believe we need to trim administration. We have states and cities around the country that have a larger population than Vermont that have 1 supervisory union. So we know that it can be done. So I guess those are the basics. But what it comes down to for me is what I hear on a daily basis is that people can't afford to live here. Between their property taxes and their health care insurance, they can't afford to live here. So we've got an education system that Vermonters can't afford. If they don't want to change the districts, if the legislature decides they don't want to change the districts, how do you change the cost of education so that Vermonters can afford to live here? My personal belief is the foundation. I don't want to dictate closing schools. I think there's a lot of small schools that are doing a good job at an affordable rate. They shouldn't be closed because they're small. But what we need to do is say, here's how much you get to educate each student. You got to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, so I'm supportive of Act 73. I was asked that again going into Ways and Means. Again, there's a lot of things to consider and figure out. I did go to a few meetings recently. One was the Northeast Kingdom Education Collaborative Group over in St. Johnsbury. Of course, as you know, the superintendents, principals, and all that certainly supported the task force recommendations. I think they failed miserably. I think you talk about the cooperative education service areas. That's the question I had was, that's something that could be done without legislative action. Why hasn't it been done? If this is going to be the answer, I know up in my area, Irisburg School has kindergarten through 4th grade, 5th grade through 8th grade goes to Albany. There's a similar situation in Barton and Greensboro, a similar situation in Orleans and Brownington. It's already happening, folks. And you know these small schools, whether it's Lowell School or whatever, it's not cost affordable. And I agree with the Lieutenant Governor. The foundation formula, when we sat down and listened to the reports, most all other states use a foundation formula, and it's tied to a similar thing as a consumer price index to kind of hold the line, especially with the number of students that we're losing. Seems like every year we're down to around 80,000 now, and yeah, we have to do something, and this is what the governor's staking things on, and the push is there. It's bipartisan, so I hope we can come up with a good solution in the end.
Just to briefly, I supported Act 73, and I believe the foundation formula is a route we probably should go down to try to work. There'll be a lot of stuff going on in all these committees to work on this, but it's the current system is broke, and I'm looking to see if we can find a system that will make it sustainable.
Before I make a decision, I need to be convinced by the data and the evidence that a change in the school districts will result in savings. I haven't yet seen that. I'm open to look at it, but I need to be convinced of that before I move in that direction.
I'm just really interested, it's been talked about here, about how we make sure we're putting adequate investments in our technical and career centers and really making sure that they're available to all students.
Similarly to Dave, I need to see where it plays out. As my constituents know, I rely heavily on our school districts to give me information and let me know how this is going to impact them. I want to see a system that is not going to penalize the schools that are doing a good job at managing their budgets and continuing to put funding where it needs to go. That is not an equitable system. And so that's what I need to see in order for me to support that. So.
Okay, thanks, everybody. I think we'll end it on that. We're close to time. I appreciate everybody coming. Again, thanks in favor of Mark.